In this video you will learn how to use a library Tanstack table in order to get a table inside React which is fully typed with TypeScript on extremely good level. And in nowadays world, the problem with a lot of TypeScript libraries is that they are not good enough. You don't really get every single autocomplete, every single validation possible, and really often you just get some general TypeScript rules only for most important methods. But it is not like that when we're talking about Tanstack. If you don't know what is Tanstack, this is a lot of different libraries which are extremely type-safe and which are the pinnacle of how TypeScript should be written. And the most popular library is obviously Tanstack Query for React, where we fetch data from the API, and the second most popular library is probably Tanstack Table. The main point is that this is a CDK for you, it doesn't have any styling inside, so this is not something like Angular material where you are getting lots of styles out of the box. This is something more similar to Angular CDK where you are getting just functions which help you to build your table. So no styling, just useful functions, but you will get enough functions to build your tables of any complexity. Let's have a look here on the documentation. As you can see on the left, it is supported with React, Svelte, Vue, and vanilla JavaScript and TypeScript. So what we're getting here are things like rendering tables, headers, cells, ordering columns, pinning, sizing, visibility, filtering, grouping, pagination, whatever you might need. And all this stuff is covered with TypeScript extremely good. This is why in this video I will show you how to build a user table with sorting and filtering by using this library. And our first step is to jump inside console and install Tanstack React table, because here we're doing it for React framework. After installation, let's look on my project. Here inside app, I already prepared for us a users table, which is just an empty component. As you can see here, I have a little bit of styling that we will use, and inside users table TS, I have this component. So inside I have just a form with the input to make a filtering, and I have a completely empty table without the head or the body. And additionally here on the top I prepared a type user with ID, name and age, because this is exactly what we want to render in our table. As you can see in browser, there is nothing really to look at. This is just a search from this form and our table is not there. So let's start with implementing Tanstack table. And the first thing that we need to implement is columns. This is why here, even before our component, we want first to get a column helper, which is a helper of Tanstack, which will help us to generate columns easier. And in order to do that, we can get create column helper, as you can see from Tanstack React table, and we must provide here our type. As you can see, it is unknown by default, which is obvious, and we want to provide here our user. Why is that? Because with that we're saying for Tanstack, okay, we want to create a table for our users. And as you can see now, it is nicely typed with column helper user. After this, we want to create our columns. And what is our columns? This is just an array where we want to render an ID, a name and age. And in order to do that, we will call column helper. And as you can see here, we have access to our accessor. And with it, we can create the field. As you can see here, already we are getting nice autocomplete. We can't really write other fields here except of what we have in the user. This is the magic of TypeScript when it is done on a good level. This is why here we want to select ID, and here we have an object. And we want first of all to provide here a header, and this is just a function which will return for us an ID capitalized, because this is how we want our header to be rendered. And secondly, we want to provide here a cell. We're getting information inside our cell. This is a function. And here we can call info.getValue. So it must render a value from our cell. Now here we can copy paste this column helper 2 more times. And here update ID to name. And the header will be name. And the last one here will be our age with header age. And obviously, if I will write foo here, we will get an error that foo is not inside our user. Now we want to use a hook in order to create a table. So let's create here our table by using use React table. And we must provide inside our options I'm sorry for interruption, but I just want to let you know that I have lots of advanced courses on different web technologies where we create real applications and prepare for the interviews. You can find the link in the description box below. Now let's jump back into the video. First of all, here we must provide data, which is the data that we want to fill the table with. We don't have here any data, this is why I want to create a state for our users and set users. And let's say that here we have a use state with an empty array. So now we can throw inside our data users, because this is the same data type like our user. After this, we must throw inside columns that we prepared. Also, debug table, true, is nice to have for debugging purposes. And the last one is get core row model, where we must call get core row model. And if you for some reason don't know some function inside this library, you can use a search here on the left and just search, for example, get core row model and get a nice documentation. So we can see here that this is a factory that returns a model for our table, and it must be called once per table. This is exactly what we are doing here. So we successfully prepared our table. Now it is time to render it inside our t-head and t-body. So inside t-head we can access table.get header groups, and this is a function. And here we can use map because this is an array, and we're getting access to a header group. And here we want to render a row. This is why here we must use a key because we're inside map, and here inside every header group we're getting a unique ID. Additionally, for styling for our cells, it is not related to this library, I want to add a class users table cell. So here we have our row inside. Now inside we want to render cells. This is why here we can take our header group dot headers, and here we're mapping through all our headers and we're getting access to every single header. Now inside here we can render our th, and we must use here a key from header.id, which is also unique. And actually I did it a little bit wrong. This class name should not go on our tr, it should go on our th. Now inside our th, we want to render a cell information. This is why here we can write that we have a div, and inside we're calling a function flex render. And as you can see here, this is a function which helps us in rendering headers, cells, and footers with custom markup. So we can provide here our header.column definition .header. And as a second parameter, we must provide header.getContext. And I totally understand that it really looks quite difficult because we're calling lots of different functions from this library and you are seeing them for the first time. But bear with me because this is what makes this library really configurable. You can't do a library configurable if everything is extremely easy made. So just for you to understand, we have our table and we're calling getHeaderGroups to get all our rows if we have several of them, which can be possible. Now here inside our row we're getting every single header, so our cells inside the header. And inside we're using this function flexRender. We will use it for header cells, for normal cells, for footer, everywhere. Now let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page here, and as you can see in our table, we successfully rendered our row with ID, name and age. Now let's do exactly the same with t-body. And here we want to render our table.getRowModel, which will return for us our rows, and we can map through them and get every single row and render it here. So it is just normal tr with a unique key, which will be row ID. Now inside our tr, we want to call row get visible cells. Why is that? Because actually this library is configurable and it can be possible that you want to hide some cells. So here we're mapping through every single cell, we're getting access to it, and we can return a TD. And inside our TD, we have also a key, which is our cell ID, and also a class name. And our class name will be exactly the same like inside header cell, this is just for styling. And now inside our TD, we can use exactly the same flexRender function. And we're calling it with cell.column definition, and here we have our cell. And our second parameter will be cell getContext. So I think it is already a little bit more clear for you. So here we have a table, we render here our header groups, and here we're rendering our rows with cells inside. Most importantly, it is extremely difficult to write code incorrectly because TypeScript will scream for you. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page and obviously we don't see any data at all because our users array is empty. Let's change this now. What I want to do, I want to simply try and throw inside a user with ID 1, name foo, and age 40. As you can see now, when I'm reloading the page, we're getting this information inside our table. But it is obviously not what we want to fetch this data from the API. And in order to do that, I have here running JSON server with db.json. Let's have a look. Inside root of my project, I have this db.json with 3 users, which actually means we want to fetch this information and put it inside our users. So let's write here a user fact, and we want to call it on initialize. So here we have an empty array. So what we need here is a URL to fetch our data, and it will be localhost 3004/users. Now here we can use fetch with this URL, and we're getting the response, which we need to parse with the JSON. After this, we will get users back as a response, and we can set them inside our state by calling setUsers function. Let's have a look. I'm reloading the page, and we successfully rendered 3 users from our API. But it is not all. As you can see here, we have a search, and it would be nice to be able to filter our data. And essentially, this logic is not related at all to Tanstack, it is outside of it. So what I want to do here, I want to provide inside name like parameter, which will equal our search value. And essentially, as you can see here on the top, I have a form and a submission of this form. And inside submission here, I am updating the search value. This is why we're using it here inside useEffect, but obviously we must provide a search value here as a dependency. Now every single time when we update our search value, we are making an API call. Let's have a look. I'm typing here Jack, and we're getting from the backend just Jack. This is how we implement filtering with Tanstack, but realistically it is not about it at all. We're filtering the data from our API. But what about sorting functionality? It is completely possible to implement it inside Tanstack table. This is why here on the top I want to prepare sorting as a property and set sorting. Now here we can write useState for the sorting state. And as you can see, sorting state is coming from Tanstack React table. This is why here we must provide an array and not some specific value, because it is more flexible than just a string. Now here inside our table, we must provide a state object with field sorting, which we just created. Also, we must provide a callback on sorting change, which will be set sorting. This is just updating of our state. And this is everything that we need in order to implement sorting. The only thing that we're missing is the possibility to change it here on the header. We want to click and update our sorting. And in order to do that, we can go inside our th here, and we want to apply first of all a different class and then add here arrows. This is why here what I want to do inside our div, I want to spread some logic. This is why here we're spreading an object just in line. And we can write here that we want a class name, and we want to check if our header column get can sort, which means our column is sortable. Then we want to attach here a class cursor pointer and select none. In other case, we're attaching here an empty string. And additionally to that, we need here a non-click event, and it will be header.column.getToggleSortingHandler. And as you can see, we have another stuff like grouping handler, visibility handler, but we don't need that for now. So the main point is here we have onClick event, and we are calling getToggleSortingHandler, which will do all our logic for us. But this is just a click. We also want to render our arrows. This is why after flex render, we want to render inside just a string, but we want to read it from the object. This is why in line we can create here an object with ascending, and here we will have an icon for ascending and descending. And here is an icon for descending. So essentially this is an object, and we can call a parameter on this object, which will be header.column.getIsSorted. And we want to write here a string, and if we don't have it, then we want to render here null. So as you can see here in line, what we wrote is that we have an object with ascending and descending, and here we're reading a value, and our value is header column getIsSorted as string. which essentially means all this construction will return for us an icon. In other case, it will be null. And you might think, okay, but why we're writing code really like this? It is not extremely readable in line. You could create here an additional function and move all this stuff here, but the main point is that here you have access to your header. This is why in a lot of examples of this library, you will find that they are writing the code in line to avoid changing context and jumping here and there to the functions, which actually means here we're working with the header. This is why we're attaching here attributes based on our header. Exactly the same with this stuff, as we have access here to get is sorted, we're rendering here our icons. Let's have a look if it's working. I'm reloading the page, but don't have any sorting. Now I can click here and we can see descending sorting. I'm clicking again and we see ascending sorting. I can click here and it will be changed. But obviously our data are not changed at all because we don't react on that. And we must do it inside our use effect by calling here sorting. So let's have a look how sorting looks at all. So here I am reloading the project, and as you can see our sorting is an empty array. Now I'm clicking on our name and we're getting inside sorting just a single object with ID name. This is what column we're sorting, and descending false. I'm clicking here again and we're getting descending true because now we're sorting in descending. But obviously here we want to put this sorting inside our URL. And what I want to do here, first of all, we need to get our order. We can use it by sorting 0.descending. In this case, we're providing descending. In other case, we're providing ascending. I'm doing like this because our API wants a string, not true or false. And another thing that we need is a sort property, and we can read it from sorting 0.id. If it is there, it is fine. If not, then we want to fall back to id because this is our default sorting. Now here we can use these parameters. It will be underscore sort equals. Here will be our value sort and underscore order. And here we can put our parameter order. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page, and as you can see, it is broken. Cannot read properties of undefined, which actually means here when we're getting an order, we want to check if our sorting is there, because if sorting array is empty, then obviously we can't read this description. And exactly the same we should do here in our sorting. Let's reload the page again. As you can see, we don't have any errors, and here are our data. I'm clicking here on the name, and as you can see, this column is resorted. I'm clicking on the age, and now this age is resorted. As you can see, Tanstack table is not a simple solution, but it is extremely flexible, and when you get used to it, your application is bulletproof with the Typescript. But if you still think that this is too much for your React table, you might want to build it from scratch with sorting and filtering. It is not that difficult, and I already covered that in this video.